Story number 6, Bunk Bed Buddies. My parents, Mr. and Mrs. Cyril Gauthier, had 5 children. I have 3 older brothers and 1 older sister. I am their youngest son. Our grandmother, Dad's mother, Mrs. Gertrude Gauthier, lived with us. I have very happy memories of our time spent together as a family. While my grandmother slept on the main floor of the house, the rest of the family had bedrooms upstairs. The upstairs of our homestead had 3 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. My parents and my sister had their respective separate bedrooms at the front of the house. The 4 boys shared a huge room at the back of the house over the kitchen, which was affectionately referred to as the boys' room. In the early years, this ample room was divided in 2 by means of 2 large armoires. Each side of the room had a double bed and a few dressers for clothing and things. The bedroom had 2 bright windows facing the back of the house with views of the lawn, outhouse, gardens, and tall trees. Each half of the room had its own window. One was directly above the back door, and the other looked out over the woodshed. Back then, I shared a bed with my eldest brother Bernard, while our brothers Chris and Brian shared the second double bed in our room. Our sleeping arrangements existed like this for many years, until my brother Brian became a teenager and decided to move his sleeping quarters to a spot in the basement. Now that our room was a room for 3, and since Bernard was the eldest, we felt he deserved to have his own bed. The armoires separating the room were moved along one of the 2 roof-sloping walls, and this change opened up the room immensely. Bernie's bed got moved to one end of the room by one of the windows. The second double bed that was previously used by Chris and Brian got dismantled and taken out to the woodshed for storage. In its place, a set of bunk beds were installed along the inside wall. This newer stacked bed arrangement was where Chris and I would now sleep. Chris, who was a tiny bit afraid of heights because he had had a bad fall from a tree several years before, decided to take the bottom bunk. I was quite happy about that because I was secretly praying that I would end up with the top bunk. We both got the bed choice we really wanted. Amen. Prayers answered. After a short time, these bunk beds became a sort of oasis for the 2 of us. The beds were definitely where we slept, but they were also our place to take time out of the day or evening, simply to relax and share thoughts and dreams. Often I would take my pillows from above and curl up at the foot of Chris' lower bed, while he would bunch up his pillows at the head of his bed, and we would simply sit there crossed-legged chatting or laughing about this and that, or simply sharing silly stuff. We felt secure in that cove created by the bunk beds, having my bed overhead like a sturdy roof over above, especially if, God forbid, Otter Lake would be hit by an earthquake again. I have very happy memories of sharing many stories with my brother Chris, sitting on his bed in that comfortable cove of ours. Surprisingly, one of the stories that comes to mind now, that Chris and I discussed, was the disaster of the earthquake that supposedly had happened in Otter Lake. Apparently, according to our grandmother, there was an earthquake in Otter Lake a very long time ago. In fact, it was so bad that one lady who owned a store in town decided to sell everything at a discount because in her mind the world was ending. The earthquake, according to grandmother's accounts, caused a deep trench to open up right in the middle of the main road. Yikes! I'm not sure if this was a made-up granny tale or if it was based in reality. Maybe someone out there knows the real story. Christopher's bed was also our own special place to watch television. For years, my brother Christopher, when a young lad, had worked as a local paper boy, and as such he delivered the Ottawa Journal newspaper out to many satisfied customers. The company, to promote good work, offered coupons or prizes to the delivery boys, which enabled Chris to acquire a beautiful new black and white 12-inch TV set. It was amazing. It was brand new and much sleeker compared to the old Admiral cathode ray tube television that was downstairs in the front room. That one needed to be warmed up before any picture appeared. We would often spend much quality time after school watching our favorites, like I Dream of Jeannie, Gilligan's Island, Bewitched, The Beverly Hillbillies, and Get Smart. Of course, I was supposed to be doing my homework, but often quality time spent with Chris and the fabulous TV shows pushed the thought of algebra or economics homework to the back of my mind. Chris and I, the 2 bunk bed buddies, also had our evening routines before bedtime and sleep. Once washed and prepared for bed, it was time for evening prayers. Of course, now that my bed was 4 feet above floor level, it was impossible for me to kneel beside my bed to say my prayers. The solution, of course, was to share the space on the floor in front of Chris' lower bed. We would often kneel down side by side and say our prayers in unison. Though we were serious about our prayers, sometimes we were in competition with each other to see which one of us could finish first with the last amen. Equally often, I would get a poke in the ribs, or I would give one back, which would send us into a string of giggles, making it difficult to focus on the words in that last amen. I know I confessed this sin the next Sunday to the priest. I am positive Chris did as well, which probably made the priest laugh and say, "Silly guys." Once we were settled into our respective beds for the night, Chris on his bottom bunk and I up in the top bunk, we often would chat until we were both tired enough to sleep. We would discuss the day's events or upcoming work, projects, or celebrations. It was such a lovely way to decompress from the day and relax just before sleep. In addition to chatting, we often would listen to faraway radio stations and dream of those mysterious locales. At one time, Chris had received a gift of a crystal radio set. He would use this radio to pick up on the faraway radio signals and catch up on the news and events being broadcast from who knows where. He often shared this radio set with me to enable me to listen as well. Later on, I was gifted an electronic device from my dearest Aunt Bee. This tiny spaceship-shaped device could be wired to become several electronic tools. I was so amazed that once the device's wires were connected in a special way, it could be transformed into a mini transistor radio. It had okay reception from our bedroom at first, but with Chris' help, we installed a super long aerial made of copper rabbit snare wire. Our aerial stretched from our bedroom window to at least 50 feet or more out to one of the huge spruce trees at the border of our property. At bedtime, we would connect my transistor radio to this aerial, and amazingly, we could pick up stations from miles and miles away. The device came with one earbud, but due to the device's flexible spring-like connectors, I could easily connect two earbuds. As such, Chris and I could listen to the radio at the same time while we lay in bed. We had many happy nights listening to the latest news directly from Ottawa, Montreal, or Toronto. We enjoyed tapping or humming to disco, jazz, country, or pop music from those times, which was being beamed directly to our bedside from places like New York, Boston, Philadelphia, and even as far away as Chicago at times. Both Chris and I would feel relaxed listening to the sounds of the radio softly in our ears. This, for us, two brothers, was a perfect way to drift off to sleep. Lastly, what do all brothers do and laugh about together like silly folk? Well, especially at bedtime when all is quiet, there comes a time for normal human gas relief. So, of course, Chris and I shared many smiles and giggles about which one of us had belched a huge burp, or expelled a nasty rift of gas, or snored so bad that the carpet floor could be vacuumed with the suction from our snore. Of course, when these events happened, there would be laughs, gasps for fresh air, or blame put on one or the other. When neither of us would fess up as to who was the culprit of the gas leak, we would simply roll over, Chris would look up at me, and I would look down at him, and we would of course blame it all on our dear brother Bernie, who was peacefully asleep in his bed. Sorry, Bernie, we both love you. Brothers definitely will be brothers. Thanks for listening to this story. What a gas.